I thought it'd be cool for this video to put a shirt on to try and look more professional when giving you the advice for this video, but this is a shirt I wore 4 years ago for school, a little bit on the snug side, so I'm gonna change. Unbelievable. Look at this. Please drop a like on this video if you're excited. I've put a lot of effort into it, and I've created the ultimate Rumble guide for ranking up. And these tips can even apply if you're in high ranks like Champ 3 or Grand Champ. There are people that I've met in Grand Champ that don't know these tips. So I'm going to start by giving you just a few tips in general that you can take into your Rumble games, and then I'm going to go through the list of all 11 power-ups and how best to use them, some of the pros, some of the cons, to give you the edge in your Rumble matches. If you have any other tips you want to add and help other people watching this video, then drop them down in the comments. If I like the tip, I'll give it a little heart. Let's have a little discussion and try and improve our ranks today together. You might be thinking, why should I trust you? Well, basically, I've been playing Rumble ever since it came out, the day that it came out, so no one's been playing it longer than I have, so I have a very good knowledge of how the power-ups work. I've been Grand Champ in the last few seasons of Rumble, and I did get as high as number 20 on the top 100 leaderboard. So whilst I'm not Grand Champ mechanically in Rocket League, I say I'm around about the C2, C3 mark, I'm easily Grand Champ in Rumble, and I've solo queued there each season that I've got it. So I feel like I'm in a pretty good position to give you some of these tips. Alright, so I don't know if this actually makes a difference in Rumble, but if you haven't already, go to the Arenas tab in the Play section and like all of the default maps. You know, DFH Stadium, Manfield, Beckwith Park. Like the maps that are normal. You don't have the option to actually dislike the Octagon maps or the Throwback Stadium maps for the Rumble playlist, but maybe liking the original maps will give you a better chance of getting them as opposed to the maps like Old Neo Tokyo with the ramps, because that's just annoying. The Octagon maps are okay, but I much prefer the standard field, so just give them a like on the Arenas tab. This one again is not essential, but if you want to be talking to your teammates maybe before the game and during the game, let them know your plans, your strategies so they're more on your wavelength. Perhaps turn off cross-network play if you can, because that allows you to talk and communicate more freely with your teammates. That one's not essential, but sometimes some people like to use the quick chat in a more specific way. But speaking of quick chat, I urge you to listen, because in normal mode you can always see what's possible for you or your teammates. In Rumble, you can't. Even if it looks like there's nothing on for a teammate of yours, they might have a power-up that you're not aware of. So if they spam I got it 3 times, just take a step back and trust they know what they're doing, because if I spam I got it in Rumble, they might look at me and think, well, hang on a minute, I'm in a better position to score here, I'm just going to take it. But what they don't know is that I'm about to line up a Haymaker shot, or I've got spikes that I can perfectly grab and scoot past the opponent. So if someone says I got it in the chat, even if it doesn't look like they can, just assume that they're saying that with a plan in mind and try not to get in the way. Similarly, if you have a power-up and you think you have a clear route to score that might not be obvious to your teammates, let them know in the chat, because often, certainly at the high ranks at least, if you do spam I got it, they will leave you to do your own thing most of the time. Now here's my main tip, and it might sound obvious, so I will elaborate, but that is to not waste your power-ups. So basically the main way I say this to people when I'm playing with them or whatever is, if your car can do it, don't use your power-up for it. If you go to do something that your car can do, but you feel like your power-up might be more efficient in doing so, then by all means do that. But so many people, too many people in fact, use their power-up to do something that they can do without it equally as well. This happens on offense, but also very much on defense. People panic if they see the ball coming at them, and if they have a grapple or a fist, they'll just use it to get the ball away and try and save their goal. But when you think about it, if you take the Rumble power-ups out of it, if there's a ball coming at you, you can easily get perhaps even a better bounce clear of the ball with just your car, and you get to save your power-up for the attack you could then go on. That's especially true with the fist, because if the ball's coming at you, the fist is pretty ineffective anyway, so you're actually better off keeping that for an offensive play and clearing the ball with your car. But a lot of people panic and try and use their power-ups too often, so don't waste them. And I'm going to go into more specific details as to how not to do that with each power-up later on when we go through each one with the pros and the cons and some tips that I have for you. So the aim of this guide is to give you the edge as far as the power-ups are concerned compared to people at your rank. So a tip from me at the very beginning that I always use is to, if you can help it, try and not go for the kickoffs, alright? Because if you go for the kickoff, you then have limited boost, you might not be able to find a big boost pad, and then you're usually out of the play by the time the first phase of power-ups come in. So you're not at your optimal best to be able to impact the game from that point onwards with your power-ups, which if you follow this guide, you'll be better at doing than your opponents at your rank. So one thing I love to do is just tell my opponents to take the shot, half flip back, grab some boost, and then when the power-ups come into play, I've got full boost and I'm in a good position, whether that be to defend the ball from their oncoming attack or to make an offensive play by myself. My next tip is to not panic if you don't use the power up for the first 30 seconds, particularly in the lower ranks and when Rumble wasn't a ranked game modes. As soon as the power ups came on, you could guarantee that 4 of the 6 of them were just going to get used straight away. There was going to be someone teleporting, someone punching the ball, someone getting kicked, and someone just trying to use their spikes straight away. So don't panic if you don't use it in the first 30 seconds or so, especially if you have the Plunger, the Fist / Haymaker, or the spikes. With that being said, there are power-ups that you don't want to hang on to for too long. So if there's no clear opportunity to use the Disruptor or the Boost power-up, the Tornado, or the Teleport, then it's probably better to use them in a way to just distract and throw off your other team, whilst also allowing you to get a new power-up quicker that will hopefully be a better one, such as like the Fist, the Plunger, or something like that. Those are the tier 1 power-ups that you want. So as long as it doesn't leave you open in defense, why not drive up the wall and teleport one of your opponents onto the ceiling, or just tornado spin a bunch of their defenders and just try and disrupt things. As long as it doesn't leave you open at the back, by all means do it and get yourself a better power-up. Hopefully. Obviously, that's where RNG comes in. Sometimes you do get 2 minutes of just bad power-ups, one after the other. But that doesn't happen as often as you may think. Because obviously, RNG is evolved in Rumble, but across the course of a 5 to 10 minute game, the better team will usually win. It's very, very rare that the result is decided entirely on luck. It's just about how you use your power-ups. Now the next tip, obviously you don't need me to tell you that Rumble is absolutely crazy, so rotation has to be on point, to the point where you pretty much always have to have a keeper, because the ball can find its way into the back of your own net from anywhere on the pitch in less than a second. Even if it doesn't look likely, it's possible. Someone could get the super strength power up and just pinch it off their wall onto the ceiling and into your goal. It can happen. I've seen it happen. Goals of over 200 kilometers an hour that would be unsavable in most scenarios. So try and have a keeper pretty much all the time. Now I do have an advanced tip for you before we then get into the list of items, and this is for the first phase of power, I'm calling it. So if you can, it's something that I do, get into the habit of counting what power-ups get used immediately, because as I said earlier, especially at lower ranks, as soon as the power-ups come into play, a lot of them just get spammed, and this will actually help you know your chances of getting your power-up interfered with. So let me paint the picture. 10 seconds have passed, 4:50 on the clock, you get yourself a Fist, and you see that one opponent has a Tornado going, one opponent just lost the ball from their spikes, and one of your teammates has been given the super speed power-up. So you now know that for at least the next 5 seconds or so, no opponent is going to have a power-up to mess with your Fist. So you know that all you have to do to score now is line it up and shoot the ball into the net. Whereas if you know that some of them haven't used their power-ups, you can't just blindly fist the ball towards the net and expect it to go in, because they could freeze it, they could grapple it back at you. It's good to know as best you can what power-ups you could be dealing with from your opponents. Another tip that I just thought of, so before we get into the list of power-ups, and that is to pay attention to your opponent's positioning, because you might see them do things that don't really seem to make sense, because whilst I myself, when I'm using power-ups, try to somewhat disguise my plans, sometimes it's impossible to hide your intentions, particularly with the Plunger, for instance. It's very hard not to telegraph your intentions when you have a Plunger. So if you're defending and you see the ball coming at you and an opponent flies past the ball, don't assume that they've whiffed the shot. Assume that they have a Plunger and they're planning to plunge the ball with them. So as soon as I see an opponent drive past the ball, I'll try and position my car in between them and the ball so that when they do plunge it, they plunge it into me and I can stop the attack. It really is quite obvious when people are using certain power-ups, when they try and, you know, miss the ball on purpose, that you see them lining it up. So just be wary of your opponent's positioning. So before we get into the list of the 11 power-ups, the pros, the cons, and some tips I have, I want to give a shout out to the sponsors of the channel, Lolga.com. So if you want to go and check them out, use the link in the description and use discount code pickapixel to save yourself 6% off at checkout. You can check out their gift cards, their trade-up section, their credits, all that stuff. And then we're going to get back into the specifics that will really give you the edge on your opponents at your rank in Rumble. This video is brought to you and made possible by Lolga.com. So if you want to check them out, be sure to use the link in the description and use discount code Pixel for 6% off your purchase. You can check out their gift cards, their credits, anything you like the look of on their site, you can go over there. And as I said, use the discount code to save yourself some money. Massive thank you to Lolga for sponsoring the video, and let's get on with it. Power up number 1 is the boot, and this is where you get a spring-loaded foot, kick your opponent when they're in range. Now, some pros of this power up are, of course, that it is overpowered in a 1v1 situation. Now, at the Grand Champ ranks, it's not often that you get one-on-one with the keeper, and even if you are, someone interferes from behind you, and it's quite an unlikely situation. But at the lower ranks, if you're past 2 players, if they've flown past, they've used their power up, and there's just one keeper, you can dribble the ball straight at them pretty much and just kick them out the way and guide it into an empty net. So that's one thing that the boot is very good for. Another one is that it completely ruins aerial attempts from an oncoming attacker. If someone's going up for an aerial and you kick them, they're not going to be able to do anything with that aerial anymore unless they get a power up involved. So it's very good for that. And as well as that, it can counter the spikes power up when they try an aerial. And this ties in with a tip that I have for the spikes later on. But a lot of people, when they go to attack the net, they actually aerial with the spikes, thinking that it'll give them a better chance of scoring. And then if they go in the air, they then can't control what happens when they get kicked. They can get sent. Some negatives of this power up are that it's completely ineffective at the wrong angle. If you are perhaps in line with them and the wall, if you kick them, it'll do next to nothing. You can actually kick them forward in a way that actually helps them. So just be sure that you're kicking against the angle that they're going. So if they're coming up like this and you kick like this, it's good. If they're coming up like this and you kick them from behind, you're just going to kind of help them along their way. So make sure you've got your angles covered with the boot, okay? Another disadvantage of the boot is that in close quarters, it can be quite hard to lock on. If someone's really, really close to you and you just want to get them out the way, particularly up on the wall or on the ceiling, it can be quite difficult for the boot to actually lock on to your opponent. And similarly, when they're really, really far away and you can see they're going for an aerial and you just get within range, because they're that far away, it's not an instant impact. So by the time you use your power up, they could have not hit the ball, but by the time the boot goes from you to them, they could get their shot off or something, and then whilst you will kick them away, the ball's still coming at you and you still have that problem. So just beware of that. Try and do it as soon as possible to stop them on an attack. And remember that in close quarters, it can be a bit tricky to lock on to your opponent. The next power-up is called the Disruptor, and this is basically where you cut the brakes of your opponent and they're just boosting all the time. And obviously one big positive of this, there's not many to this one, it's one of the worst power-ups, but it can completely remove the keeper. Especially at the lower ranks, this will surprise the player. They've got in their head the plan, the way they plan to defend your attack, but as soon as you give them full boost, that plan goes out the window. Obviously, at better ranks, they can adapt, they can aerial, they can power slide to sort of counteract the effects of this power-up, but it can get keepers out the way. I would say the main negative of this power-up, other than it being not particularly useful in most scenarios, is that it takes a long time for you to get a new power up, because the 10-second countdown to get one doesn't start until that effect has worn off the opponent. So for about 15 seconds, your car only, okay? So yeah, as I briefly touched on just now, if you get this used on you, one way you can improve your control with this power-up is to use the power slide to help you brake. You can actually still stop your car dead and then use the boost as just a method of hitting the ball normally if you do a 180 U-turn with the drift, because if you're not going in any direction, you can't boost anywhere, basically. The next power-up is the freeze. Now, one great use of this is giving yourself the edge on players in terms of knowing where the ball is going to be. If you're going to freeze the ball while someone's going for an aerial, if they pre-flip or if they pre-jump, they're going to get absolutely sent. And that also means you know before everyone else where the ball's going to be. So if the ball is traveling quite fast and a defender jumps out to clear it and you freeze it, they'll be gone. But not only that, you'll be in the best position to then follow up and hit the ball next. Obviously on defense, if there is a power shot that you just cannot stop with your car, as long as you're within range, if it's sailing over your head, you can freeze it. If you're the first line of defense, you can freeze it above your head as you realize you can't get it, and then your teammates can come from behind and clear the ball for you. So it's pretty good for that. And as well as that, it is probably the best counter to one of the most overpowered power-ups in Rumble, and that is the magnet. Unless they are dragging the ball in front of them at the time you freeze it, the magnet will absolutely send the other person, because if it's frozen, they can't drag it with them, they're out the game. One negative of the freeze is that if the ball is traveling really, really fast, it's not an instant freeze, it does drift a little bit. So if it's a power shot on the goal line, you can freeze it and it could still just trickle in. As well as that, the freeze can somewhat fail if the plunge is still pulling it with that slingshot mechanic. You can freeze the ball, but then it will just drop and it can still roll into the net. It's not a sure thing, but it is a very useful power-up. The next power-up, one of my favorites, is the Grapple. This is the best defensive power-up in Rumble, and it works best when the ball is traveling at you because you get thrown into the ball. So if the ball's traveling at you, that impact, the force from both sides, creates a bigger hit on the ball. So naturally, if it's good when the ball's coming at you, it's great in defensive situations, and as well as that, it guarantees a hit on the ball. So if you've got a tough aerial that you don't think you can make, if you're in range, the Grapple will guarantee that you get to the ball, and especially if you're on defense and someone's coming at you with spikes, it's a guaranteed block. Most of the time, I say guaranteed, sometimes it does glitch, sometimes you might accidentally hit their car somehow, but it's a very, very good guaranteed stop for most spike attacks. One negative of the Grapple is that it's not instant impact after you use it. You have to travel the distance of the rope to actually hit the ball. This is a huge tip because so many people use the Grapple as if whenever they use it, the ball is instantly impacted. And that's not true. So if the ball is really far away and if you were to hit the ball in that exact moment, it would go in. It doesn't mean that you should use it because you've got to travel the distance from where you are to the ball. If an opponent has a power clear and they bash the ball the other way back at you, you then find yourself trailing with the Grapple and being powerless to stop yourself from hitting the ball towards your own net. So just be aware that when you use the Grapple, you have to take into account the time it will take for you to actually travel to the ball. So essentially, if you want to best attack the opponent's goal with the Grapple, you have to jump ahead of time. If the ball's traveling up towards the center of the field, use the Grapple there so that instead of you thinking you're going to hit the ball here, you meet the ball in the middle and score. That's what you have to do. You have to take into account the travel time with the Grapple. So that can be a negative, it can be a positive, but just bear that in mind. One big negative of the Grapple that is just, in my opinion, it's a glitch, but basically it doesn't work / it glitches if the ball is traveling at you at really high speeds. I'm talking like 200 kilometers plus. If they get a double fist both at you and you grapple, the power of the shot will just push you back and you'll kind of glitch onto the ball and be thrown back with it, and it won't clear like it should do. So just be aware of that. And of course, like I said, obviously it does really well when the ball's traveling at you, but that means if the ball's traveling away from you, it does next to nothing. If it's cleared off the backboard and you grapple it and it just gets to the point where you're chasing the ball, when you touch it, it doesn't really do anything. The next power-up is the Haymaker, or the Fist, and this is great on offense. It's probably the best power-up for just scoring goal after goal after goal. It's great when the ball is traveling away from you. Unlike the Grapple where it's good when it's traveling at you, the Fist is great when the ball is traveling away because it just adds speed to the ball. This means that there's also a really good counter-attacking weapon, because I do this when I'm on defense. If they shoot a shot that's over the bar, so this is where you hope you're on a normal map because you will actually have a backboard, unlike the throwback stadium. If it hits the backboard, you can then line your car underneath it so that when it comes off the backboard, you can then fist it with absolute power to just bang it into their net. And what was a defensive position for you can be turned into an attacking position with the power of the fist. As well as that, of course, it is much quicker impact compared to a Grapple or something like that. So it can be great for a last-ditch defensive effort. If a ball's just flying towards the net, as long as you're not in line with the ball and the goal. I've seen many own goals with the fist, many panic own goals. It can be great to just punch the ball away. The thing is with the Fist and the Plunge in particular, they are what I call premium power-ups, and I would say if you're not using it to save a guaranteed goal or score a goal, you've kind of missed out because they're so strong. You should be able to score or save with those power-ups in most cases. And yeah, the only real negative of this power-up is that it does next to nothing if the ball's traveling at you. If someone's hit the ball at you from their own half and you think that the goal is open, you can score with a fist, I would think again, because the punch is a bit of a weed when it comes to punching a traveling ball in your direction. It just sort of cancels it out and leaves it in the middle. The next power-up is the Magnet power-up, and this is a really, really great one. The big pro, of course, is the air drags and what I call bunny hops are very difficult to defend and predict, and they did do an update, not recently, but they did do an update where they strengthened the pull of the magnet, and this makes air drags very, very useful and very overpowered. If you've got the ball at the start of your magnet power-up and full boost, take it up the wall, go on the ceiling, it's very, very hard to defend, and they'll have to get a power-up involved if they want to stop you, because it's very unlikely that they'll be able to do so with just their car. Another one, the bunny hop mechanic, is good because it takes it from high to low, uncharacteristically quick, and it becomes very, very difficult to defend. And even with no boost, if you just get off the ground a little bit, the momentum of bringing the ball up will swing it way higher than you, and then you falling down will drag it down way quicker, and it's very, very difficult to stop. One negative of the magnet is that it doesn't last very long, unlike the super strength power hitter power-up, but the main one is that if you're using it as an offensive play, you kind of have to fully commit. You know, if you're dragging it through the air, you can't half-heartedly do an aerial. Once you get in the air, you're gone. So if someone does use a power-up like the freeze, for instance, to counter it, you're out the game, and it takes a while for you to get back into it. So that is a negative. Whilst you can have fruitful times scoring goals with the magnet, you do have to fully commit to trying to score with it, and that can go wrong. The next power-up is the Plunger. A lot of people have said that this is like my aimbot power-up because I'm particularly good with this one, and it's just great all round, both for offense and defense. It's really, really good. And as well as that, if there is no clear route to goal, if there's a goalkeeper, then you can actually use it. This is quite advanced, but you can use it to pass to yourself. It's ridiculously handy. This sounds really obvious, but a lot of people, even at Grand Champ, don't quite get this, and that is just make sure that the angle is actually on. Driving into the opponent's net and plunging it, even if it's in range, doesn't guarantee it goes in, because you have to think about the angle, okay? I've seen a lot of people, when the ball is really, really high, drive to the opponent's net and plunge it from there, but if you think the ball is now coming down at this angle, that is far too steep for it to go in. It will just bounce and go straight over. So think about that. One thing I love about the Plunger is the slingshot technique. So you have the first initial phase of the Plunger where you latch onto the ball and it begins to travel in the direction of your choice. But then if it's on the half volley, either just before or after a bounce, or you drive up the back of their net, you can then slingshot the ball and give it almost like a second lease of life and give it extra power to really just fly it into the goal. The only real negative of the Plunger that I can think is that it's not guaranteed to work every time, in the sense that if the ball is traveling away from you too quickly, it will just break. But I mean, that's fine. That's not really a problem, to be honest. Coming up next, we have the power hitter. Now, obviously, this is the power-up where you can demolish on contact. So even if you're not trying to get involved with the play in terms of scoring a goal or defending a goal, you can just disrupt the other team, especially in the lower ranks, I'd imagine, when the game's a little bit slower, and just demo maybe even all three opponents and let your teammates clean up. Now, this seems quite simple in theory, but it's quite an advanced tip, I would say. But if you use this precisely, it can create absolutely unsavable shots. Even if you have, you know, grapples, it can be too quick. Even if you're positioned perfectly in defense, it can be impossible to save some shots with this power-up. Another positive to this power-up is that it does last a very long time. So if you use it right before you hit the ball and you make a mistake, you will definitely have enough time to try and get yourself involved in another play with that extra power, whilst demolishing people on the way. Obviously, the negative means that with so much extra power, if you're not precise, you can easily own goal or negatively affect your own team. You can also miss shots that you wouldn't miss without that power up. If it gets to the stage where the ball is just floating in front of their net, but it's quite a tight angle, you would be able to originally get the finesse to drop it below the crossbar and in. But if you try and hit it with this power up and you're in the wrong position, you will just bash it into their backboard, and it will give you a problem going back as well, because it's just so overpowered. So just be careful, try and learn to finesse with it, and know that you don't have to actually hit it full power to generate a really strong shot with this power-up. You can just sit and let the ball hit you, and it creates a powerful enough shot in most cases. The next power-up is the spikes power-up. Now, this literally sticks the ball to your car, so I don't need to go through pros and cons with this power-up. Instead, I'm just going to give you a bunch of tips. Now, the first one is when you actually catch the ball with the spikes, try and ensure that it's on the top of, or at least on the side of your car, so it doesn't disrupt your driving. Because if you catch the ball with an aerial, for instance, in mid-flip, and it goes on the bottom of your car, you can't really drive with it, and there's very little chance you're going to score. So try and catch it on, I would say, the top/side of your car. If it's on the very top, it makes it quite easy to just knock off, so try and get it just on the side. This next one is a little bit advanced, but try and predict when you're going to spike the ball so that the spikes don't run out too quick, because obviously you improve your chances dramatically of actually attaching the ball to your car with the spikes if you don't deploy the spikes until very, very late, right before you hit the ball. But as a punishment for this, Rocket League actually makes the spikes last a shorter amount of time when you do this. So you might play a game of Rumble, you spike the ball as soon as you hit it, and then it just dribbles off straight away, and you might think, hang on a minute, why has that happened? And it's just that. It's that you've not given your spikes enough time, and that basically if you spike it right before you hit the ball, they're going to run out sooner. So if you see a ball that's going up to the ceiling, you know it's going to bounce down in front of you, maybe deploy your spikes then, and then catch the ball when it lands. Obviously, this decreases your chance of actually spiking the ball, but you're rewarded by getting the ball longer on your car once it happens, long enough to drive from one end of the pitch to the other. Another tip, do not use spikes ever if you have no boost, because you're basically putting the ball on a plate for your opposition, especially as well if you're in defense. If you want to use spikes, make sure you have boost, because if you're defending and you use spikes with no boost in front of your goal, you're a sitting duck. They can bump you into the goal, they can just tackle you and put it into the goal because they will have boost. So if you don't have boost, go and get boost. Keep the spikes power up in the freezer. Go and get yourself some boost, okay? My next tip for spikes is actually go to ground, because whilst in the lower ranks, it might be quite good to aerial spikes into the goal because those defenders aren't very good in the air at stopping shots because their mechanics aren't great. When you get to the higher ranks, it's actually much more efficient to stay on the ground, use the drift and stuff like that, and fake people out with the spikes, because once you go into the air, you can't really do much there. People know where you're going to go. Yes, you can air roll and rotate the ball with fine margins past defenders, but for the most part, defenders know where your car's going to be once you aerial, whereas on the ground, they don't know which way you're going to go, and in my experience, it's much easier to actually score a goal from the ground going into the net. As well as that, if you're on the ground, it can kind of negate the effect of their power-ups to try and stop you. If they freeze the ball off your spikes and you're on the ground, you still essentially have a dribble going, and it's also a lot harder for them to use the boot power-up on you when you're on the ground, because they could end up just kicking you into the floor and not doing much else with you still having the ball on your car, whereas if you're in the air, you're out the game. The next power-up is the swapper or the teleport power-up, and this is great for removing keepers and taking players out the game, of course. If you're at a lower rank and the game is a little bit slower, two of the players are out the game and your teammates on the storm, it can be very good to just lock onto that goalkeeper, get them out of the way, and then it's easy. One negative of this, particularly in the higher ranks where the game speed does get quicker, is that it takes quite a while to actually work. So when you use the power-up, if you could teleport instantly, it would work perfectly, but that second it takes to just morph you into the different place, they can get their shot off that you were trying to prevent, they can get in a different position, and it's just not the quickest power-up, basically. So essentially, the craziness of Rumble means that by the time the teleport works, it might no longer be a good idea, even if it was when you thought of it and used the power-up. And the final power-up is the tornado. Now, this actually can be used to carry the ball across the map and even accelerate shots. That's obviously a very advanced mechanic to actually intentionally score with the tornado, and even at Grand Champ it doesn't happen often, but I've seen some very good goals. I've scored some very good goals with the tornado, and it creates this, I suppose, funnel effect on the ball where if you're driving forward, it can take a ball like this and shoot it like that. If you're in the lower ranks though, it's going to be very difficult to score with the tornado, so obviously the main way you can use this is disrupting defenders and letting your teammates do the work. You can take one or two out the game, spin them about, and then score a goal from your teammates. It's great for disrupting the rotation of the other team, and although you'll be out the game in terms of an offensive play, if you can take out two defenders, it's now a 2v1 for you guys. Negatives, of course, it can be quite sporadic in terms of how it affects the ball. It's not certain. You can't guarantee the way the ball is going to react to it. You can score own goals with it. You can mess up your own teammates' plan with it. So, yeah, just bear that in mind. But that is my comprehensive Rumble guide. I can't believe I've been recording this non-stop for half an hour. This video is going to be way longer than I thought. But the main tips, obviously, do not waste your power up. Don't waste it, okay? That's my main one. If your car can do it just as well, save your power up for an offensive play, because it's usually in defense when people panic, they waste their power ups, okay? But similarly in attack, don't be so anxious and ready to score. Let it happen. It's okay to keep a power up for a little while. But that is going to do it for this video. If you did enjoy it, be sure to leave a like on it. Subscribe today to join the Pixel Army. I've been Pixel. You have been awesome, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Flying in a missile, haters throwing shade, never pick me, not an issue. I am a beast, I'm at the top, I run these beats, I hold my spot, so stop before it hits you. It's pick a pixel.